Mike Tomlin in his end-of-season press conference said the Steelers are making an outside hire at offensive coordinator. What that means, and also, is Kenny Pickett going to be QB1 next year? He said he will at least assume it, but it's not a definitive answer. We'll get to that and more questions here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Jenna Harner, let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things of the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. As always, find this show on your favorite podcasting app and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this channel for all our daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy and the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. As I said before, we're joined by Jenna Harner. She's back on the show, and we're happy to have her on a Friday, not previewing games, but we will get to a lot of things that are happening here. Jenna, how you doing?
I am great. I am just glad to be back in Pittsburgh safely and not dealing with parts of Buffalo that have received over 6 feet of snow in the last week. 6 feet. You're hearing that correctly.
It's ridiculous. Like that's taller than most of us. So that's ridiculous. But all that being said, we are glad that you made it back and that you're able to be on the show. Jenna, let's dive right into. We'll get to quarterback talk. I know people want to talk about that, but I think this was the thing that a lot of people were holding their breath about going into Mike Tomlin's press conference. It was whether or not the Steelers would make an inside hire or an outside hire at offensive coordinator. Mike Tomlin gave a pretty firm answer right out of the gate during his press conference.
Foresee either Eddie or Mike Shelton being candidates for the offensive coordinator job?
Not at this juncture, man. I'm looking at outside candidates and lining up the pecking order there. I am appreciative of their efforts in terms of what they did for us down the stretch, but I'm looking at outside candidates at this juncture.
Pretty straightforward answer there, Jenna. And, I think he did a good job acknowledging, like, hey, we liked what Eddie Faulkner and Mike Sullivan did to try to right the ship at the end of the season. And it was part of what got them to the playoffs. But this is a Steelers team that needs a revamping on offense, and that takes an outside hire to start that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was kind of intriguing because you kind of got that sense a little bit when we talked with some of the players in the locker room at Locker Cleanout earlier this week. They really did same thing as Tomlin, acknowledge, hey, we really liked what these guys did. And obviously they're not giving their take on who they think should be offensive coordinator or anything like that. But this kind of seems to go with that same messaging where it was like, I think a lot of the players knew that this wasn't going to be a long-term solution, Eddie Faulkner and Mike Sullivan, in terms of being the offensive coordinators. But this, in my mind, is exactly what needs to happen. This is exactly what the Steelers need to do. You have to look outside. You need to find someone that's a brilliant offensive mind, that is a quarterback guru, quarterback whisperer, however you want to put it, someone that is going to get the best out of Kenny Pickett, and someone that is going to come in with creativity, with innovation, with offense that we haven't seen from the Steelers in at least my time in the last 4 seasons that I've been here, but even longer than that. You need an offense that is going to be able to compete with the likes of the Bills offense, the likes of the Chiefs offense. I mean, you just look across the AFC, the Ravens. You also have, the Chargers and so many high caliber quarterbacks, high powered, high caliber offenses. The Steelers have to kind of come into the 21st century here and find ways to really be able to compete with those teams if they want any chance of not only just winning a playoff game, but moving even forward and taking steps towards making it to a Super Bowl, winning a Super Bowl.
Yeah, I agree. It's a big change that needs to happen. You need a more modernized offense that gets guys open. And not just that, and I said this before, like the Steelers had plays to get guys open, but you need a system and an offensive coach who can be with the quarterbacks, who can get them to be looking in the right places at the right times, who understands what the Steelers are trying to do day to day and help the team understand what they're trying to do day to day. We saw the offense find an identity. We saw because not just the passing game, but the run game, figure out who it was in the final month of the season. And, had they figured that out much earlier, who knows what else this team could have done, who knows if they beat the Patriots and the Cardinals and the Colts in those weeks. And if they do those, instead of playing for their playoff lives against the Ravens, they might be playing for the 1 seed at the end of the season. Now, that doesn't guarantee that they'd go much further in the playoff, because I think if they run into a team like the Bills, they're still in trouble. But if they find their feet a lot earlier, it gives them such a better chance to win their games and many more paths to find those wins instead of just relying on the defense the way they did for the first 2 months.
And that was something too, again, back to locker cleanout this week too. Pat Fryermuth mentioned that, that was one of the biggest questions of how do you guys get over the hump here of not winning a playoff game? And he said, we have to get to our identity sooner in the year. We have to find that. We have to be able to get to that level, not at the last month of the season. Cam Hayward was talking about, you want to be trending upward and kind of consistently trending upward in that way. And I think this new hired offensive coordinator needs to be able to bring that. And of course, with their system and things along those lines, they're going to, but they need to be somebody that can come in, that can implement something that says, hey, look, this is going to be our identity. We are going to stick to it. We are going to find what works. We're going to have that balance of run and play action that can really open up the passing game and utilize the strengths that are on this offense right now. Again, you look at what Najee Harris and Jalen Warren have been able to do, especially in the latter half of the season. You look at the ability that we saw from Mason Rudolph to take those deep shots and find guys like Deontay Johnson, like George Pickens, and find them routinely. And in those, the last 3 games of the regular season, take out a little bit of Baltimore because of the weather, but like those 2 games before the weeks, it was 16 and 17. That was the best the Steelers offense has looked. And you need to be able to build on that. And there has to be this hire, has to be somebody that can modernize what we've seen, but at the same time say, hey, look, there's a lot of really good weapons in this offense. We're going to utilize everybody to the best of their ability, to the best of their strengths. And then, of course, get what they can out of the quarterback situation that the Steelers have right now.
Agreed. And because part of it's also not just the play calling, it's also managing the people as well. And I think that's one, like Mike Tomlin's very good at managing players, but he also needs guys other coaches to be able to do that with him. And, that's something that I'm not sure that Matt Canada was doing on the back end, on top of the other things that he wasn't getting right. And I think that's where it's important to find that mix of a great play caller and a great person who can manage, play calling and organization of the offense, but also a person who's, talking to the right guys. It can't always just come from one person with the messages. Great coaches are often made up by also coaches under them who do a great job passing on their messages. So that's where I think that the Steelers are going to be looking for an offensive coordinator, names like Eric Bieniemy, who's with the Commanders. They don't have a head coach with their situation. Can they get a guy like Bieniemy, who used to coach with Mike Tomlin with the Vikings? Can they get a guy like Kellen Moore, who was with the Chargers after 4 years with being with the Cowboys? Shane Waldron, who's been with the Seahawks. Lots of names float out there. Those are going to be interesting, but we also know now, it's been reported after the fact, after the press conference, that Mike Tomlin will be getting an extension with the Steelers definitively. We said that, yes, I said that yesterday on the show with Alan Saunders on the Thursday episode. It's very likely now that they're bringing him back. I even said that on Wednesday, as well. But to me, this is a sign that, like, hey, the Steelers are committed to not only Mike Tomlin, but committed to getting him a stronger offensive coordinator who can help him lead that room as the coordinator and fit this system to get this unit finally on track for the first time in a long time.
And you almost too wonder, at least this is what I'm wondering, if it needs to be a little bit of like a younger voice, just because, again, Mike Tomlin does such a great job of getting the best out of his players. But is he relating to them the way he related to them 10 years ago? We're seeing this new generation of players. Social media is obviously a big part of, society today. And a lot of the players, their lives, especially some of, the rookies, first, second year guys, you almost wonder if you have that offensive coordinator who is in between the age gap that you see between Mike Tomlin and the players. I'm not calling anybody old. We're not going there. I know how it is whenever we say to Cam Hayward,
But he's 51.
Exactly. That's the reality of it, is that for a lot of these players now, it's like, this guy is closer to my dad than he is like, the veteran players in the locker room. So you almost wonder if you have that voice, how much of an impact that's going to be. Because again, we also know leadership was a big problem on the offense this year. There really wasn't that one main guy that was the leader. You can say, of course, Kenny through ups and downs this season. We saw Najee Harris in some leadership roles when he had to be, things like that. But there really wasn't this true, like, definitive leader that we see on the defensive side of the ball when you have guys like Cam Hayward, guys like TJ Watt, Minkah Fitzpatrick, Alex Highsmith, like those types of guys. And not saying that that's not the case entirely, but you almost wonder if you bring in a younger guy, if someone like that is going to act like a leader, especially for an offense that's as young as it is.
Absolutely. And I want to talk about that in the next segment because there's questions about who will be quarterback one. Mike Tomlin kind of gave an answer, but kind of also didn't. And I think it's going to be interesting to piece apart what he was talking about. We'll do that here on the other side of the break here of the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Jenna Harner, stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, we'll remind you all, we are sponsored by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, that's what brings home the winning trophy, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything that you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers to roof racks, exhaust kits, LED lights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. With eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts that you need and the prices that you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. We're also brought to you by FanDuel. With the NFL playoffs well underway, you too can win big with incredible offers from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 back in bonus bets with winning any $5 money line bet. That's right, $150 back in bonus bets if you just pick the right team on a $5 bet. If you've been looking to join FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. It's an app you can download right to your phone. It's super easy to use, and as soon as you get on it, you're betting against the spread. You're putting down player props. You're doing over unders. You're doing all your parlays, and there's so many different ways to win across all the sports, not just NFL games, NBA, college basketball, NHL, all the different things you can get into right now on FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. So go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to get ready for the NFL playoffs and take advantage to make sure that you're a winner too by going to, again, FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. Back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast, Chris Carter, Jenna Harner, talking about the Steelers and with Mike Tomlin's final press conference of the season, getting ready for how the Steelers will approach their offseason. Now, Mike Tomlin also addressed, on top of offensive coordinator, what his vision is for the Steelers quarterback one with situation with Kenny Pickett. Will Kenny Pickett be the starter? Well, listen to how Mike Tomlin answered that, and then also talked about his confidence in Kenny Pickett. Here was Mike Tomlin from Thursday.
Will Kenny resume his QB1 status?
You know, he will, but obviously there will be competition. There's always competition in this thing. We don't anoint anyone. I'm appreciative of his efforts and where he is, and excited about continuing to work with him. But certainly, he will be challenged from a competition perspective moving forward. Competition brings the best out in all of us.
So level in Kenny, not just on the field, everything that comes with being starting quarterback, captain, leader of his team.
I'm extremely confident in him. I feel stronger about some of the intangible things than I did, obviously, when we first started doing business with him, because I had evidence of it. He's highly competitive and professional. He doesn't run from challenges. He runs to challenges. I think that's evident in the way he plays, particularly at the end of close football games. He's got good framework to work with, and for a young guy, he's mature beyond his years. I'm excited about it.
Mike, that being said, is he at the point of his career now where some of that improvement has to be tangible, not just?
Certainly, it's a big year for him. We met this morning, and we acknowledged that. It is a huge year for him. But I'm also excited about just watching him where that component of it, because I know how he's wired and built, and I'm excited about watching him attack it.
So hearing that, Jenna, I mean, Mike Tomlin saying yes, but then quickly giving a but in there about the competition Kenny Pickett is going to be. So he's going to, presumably get the chance to be QB1. But it seems like the Steelers aren't hitching their wagon to him in the sense that they're going to double down and just make him the starting quarterback. They're going to make him have to prove it. And Mike Tomlin also went in to say, the Steelers acknowledge that Mason Rudolph can hit free agency if he wants to, and that he has every right to, but they hope to bring him back. If they bring back Mason Rudolph, I fully anticipate those two to be duking it out, but I wouldn't put it past them to try to add a third member to that quarterback room after cutting Mitch Trubisky.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And it's going to be intriguing because there are some notable free agents. I don't think that the Steelers are going to go out and bring Kirk Cousins in this offseason, but there's guys like Tyler Huntley. There's guys that are very, very viable backups in this league that I do think it could be an option for the Steelers to bring in another guy and have this be a massive competition. But realistically, I see this as we're going to be going to training camp in end of July, and we are going to be covering a quarterback competition, of course, depending on what happens with Mason Rudolph, because I wouldn't put it past some team to give him a pretty penny and say, hey, look, come compete for our starting job. But if Mason Rudolph is still here, I see full steam ahead, a quarterback competition in training camp between Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph. And I think that's going to be incredibly exciting just based on what we saw from the last portion of the season with Mason, but also what we're going to see from Kenny when he comes back after this offseason, how he's going to be healed, what changes are going to happen. And of course, this kind of all falls into the fact that there is going to be a new offensive coordinator and potentially a drastically different new offensive system for this team here too. How are these guys going to adapt to it? What are we going to see them look like with this offense, and how is this offense going to highlight them? So this to me kind of felt exactly with what I thought was going to happen, because of course the Steelers know Kenny Pickett's a first round pick. They need their guy to be the guy, and this is the year to find out if he is. But at the same time, it's hard to deny everything that we saw Mason Rudolph do at the end of the season and say, hey, look, this guy doesn't, this guy absolutely deserves a shot too. You can't say that he doesn't. And I think this is going to be really intriguing. I'm really excited to just see kind of how things shake out here. But this is going to be an incredibly fierce competition. And you and I have seen Kenny Pickett and the level of compete and how much he loves to compete. I think this is, like Tomlin said, this is going to bring the best out of Kenny Pickett. And that's exactly what they need. And that's exactly what the goal should be this offseason, is to get every single thing you can out of Kenny Pickett to know if he is going to be your quarterback of the future or not.
Yeah, that's the crazy part of this, is that there's going to be, a competition, but Kenny Pickett's going to be given the chance. But this time around, like Mason Rudolph didn't have a legit chance to win the starter. Neither did Mitch Trubisky. No. It was always going to be Kenny Pickett's QB1, Mitch Trubisky's QB2, Mason Rudolph's QB3. Maybe there could have been a competition between 2 and 3 at some point last year. But I think the Steelers are like, all right, we acknowledge that, like, especially if Mason Rudolph's back, they acknowledge that, like, that dude, he earned a shot at it. And Kenny Pickett, even though in games that he started and finished last year, the Steelers were 7-2 in those games. And that's impressive. They know they need more at quarterback. And I think with a new offensive coordinator, it's going to be the challenge. Who can learn that offense the fastest? Who can be efficient in that offense? And can Kenny Pickett show that, hey, maybe it was just Matt Canada. Maybe it was just not great offensive game planning that put him in those situations. But if they go through and they make a serious offensive coordinator hire, and he's still not making the plays they need in games, I think that's where they're going to be, or even, not even in games, in practice. Like if Mason Rudolph looks better in practice, the Steelers are going to be are going to roll with that guy or with someone else that they bring in from the outside. And Alan and I talked about this too. I don't foresee a person like Kirk Cousins or Justin Fields. Justin Fields is going to take extra draft capital to acquire in a trade, and then you'll have to pay him after 1 year. Kirk Cousins is going to take money. Other guys are going to take money. I could see maybe more like a Jacoby Brissett, who probably might not cost you as much money, who could just be another veteran in the room. Or if they draft another quarterback in the middle rounds who could come in, sit behind those guys, learn, and could eventually, develop into a guy that if you don't like what you see at Kenny Pickett, and then Mason and Mason Rudolph isn't working out, that you have another person that you're developing for the pipeline. But point being, I think the Steelers, they're saying, hey, we're giving Kenny Pickett another chance, but we are not banking on him being the guy by pigeonholing themselves into a situation where he has to be the guy.
And you mentioned Matt Canada. I mean, this is exactly what you hope it's going to be, where you bring in a new offensive coordinator and you're like, wow, this was the offensive system that was holding Kenny back, that was holding this team back from their full potential. But there is also a potential chance that might not be the case. And that's what this team needs to figure out. Because again, you need a quarterback in the NFL to be able to compete, especially in the AFC, when you have, again, guys like we mentioned, you have Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert. Like the AFC, I mean, granted a decent amount of the teams are, but the AFC is loaded with these high caliber, really intense, some of the top quarterbacks in the league. You have to be able to compete with that. And the Steelers have to be able to find out what they have in Kenny Pickett, what they have in Mason Rudolph in this competition that we may potentially see, in order to say, hey, look, this is how we're going to move forward.
I agree. It's one of the big questions that will last all through the offseason that we will continue to hear. I think the biggest thing will be, can they re-sign Mason Rudolph in free agency? And then if they do, what is the plan? Because if they re-sign Mason Rudolph, I imagine they'd cut Mitch Trubisky. And then do they sign another person in free agency to be that third quarterback, or do they go into the NFL draft looking for that third quarterback? All of that will be answered as time moves on. But we got more things to look at, other coaching changes that could be made for the Steelers, whether on offense or defense. And I want to get Jenna's picks on the playoff games this weekend. We'll do all that here and more on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Stick with us. We still got a lot left. But first, I want to remind you that this show is also sponsored by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America, with the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports, because it's just you against the numbers. Instead of doing other daily fantasy sports platforms where you got to pick a whole roster and compete against thousands of people, and you're hoping to just get the right one that beats everybody else out, all you're doing is competing against PrizePicks itself. You pick 2 or 6 players, look at their stack projections, and all you do with each one is just say more or less. You win those, and you watch the rollings win in. For example, if you think that Patrick Mahomes is going to throw more than 2.5 touchdowns this weekend, and you say more and he does, then you got your winnings rolling on PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the fun new daily fantasy game that everyone needs to start playing right now. And with basketball season, they still have the Specials League, which you can play right now during the NFL playoffs and as the NBA season rolls along, where you can combine football and basketball players for combo picks, where you say LeBron James and Travis Kelce will combine for 10.5 3-pointers made and receptions. That's where you say more or less, and you can see if you can win on PrizePicks. PrizePicks also has a reboot policy where your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For NFL games and college football top 25 matchups, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and doesn't return in the second, the player's rebooted. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports with injury insurance. Download the PrizePicks app today, or go to PrizePicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. That's PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast, Chris Carter, Jenna Harner. Let's get into a few things here. I asked Mike Tomlin about defensive coaching staff changes, and he basically was like, we're not talking about that right now because we're not going to speculate openly with play. And listen, I get this. Like when someone, when someone hasn't been fired or let go, it's not polite, it's not courteous to talk about their job openly like that, and the potential of them being, let go or released or not re-signed. Terrell Austin, I believe, is on the last year of his deal, so he would need to be re-signed at defensive coordinator. But there's lots of questions where you look at his coaching job. Carl Dunbar, who's been with the team at defensive line for a while. I think guys like Aaron Curry at linebacker and Denzel Martin at outside linebacker, I think they're definitely safe. Grady Brown also has done a really good job with the secondary, so I think that the three of them are safe. But you ask questions about those guys, but then you also look on the offensive side of the ball, even outside of offensive coordinator. Is Eddie Faulkner safe? Is Mike Sullivan safe with their positions? Then of course guys like Alfredo Roberts, guys like Pat Meyer at offensive line. there's going to be a lot of questions the Steelers are going to kick around and have to decide who do they want moving forward with this staff.
Yeah, I'm very intrigued to see, especially offensively, how kind of things are going to shake out too when they bring in this offensive coordinator and the type of control that this OC is going to have in terms of, hey, I'm going to bring one or two of my guys. We're going to hire this guy. We're going to hire this guy. Just the process of all of it. And what moves are going to be made, because I think you can look at some different areas of this team and say, hey, look, things did look really good. You look at the run game, and when it was at its best, it was churning on all cylinders. And you saw that, in the latter half of the season. I also think too, Mike Tomlin, you heard him comment just on the job that Mike Sullivan and Eddie Faulkner did. You almost do wonder, are these guys going to revert back to their old roles? I wonder about Mike Sullivan, I guess, more than I wonder about Eddie Faulkner, but maybe that's just my opinion on things. I wonder, and again, I'm not sitting here trying to speculate on anybody's job status, because at the end of the day, these people are human and these are their jobs. But I do wonder if there might be a change in that realm. But again, we also hear all the time from all three quarterbacks just how much they like working with Mike Sullivan, how much they like, especially with the way that he was calling plays on game days for them and just that kind of aspect of things. So I do wonder, I feel like if any more changes come, they're going to be more on the offensive side of the ball. But again, that might just be me.
No, I'm with you, because I think that part of it is if they get rid of Terrell Austin, I think there might be some defensive changes with certain guys, because when you hire a coordinator, you want the coordinator to have their people in so they could make the guys that they can work with. But if they bring in an offensive coordinator, I fully anticipate several of those staff positions to change, and we'll probably find that out sooner rather than later. But on the defensive side, if they retain Terrell Austin, I think every one of them keep their jobs, because I think that I think if you look at it, this is a defense that finished 7th in points allowed on the season, and that was with 6th actually officially with the way that things shaped out. So they finished as the 6th best scoring defense in the NFL. They played 2 games where Cam Hayward, TJ Watt, and Minka Fitzpatrick were healthy from start to finish, and Cam Hayward, admittedly wasn't healthy at all this season when we talked to him because of the injury he suffered in training camp. So with all that being said, I think defense is fine. You want things to get sharper, but I think that's more about adding the right personnel and being healthier next year. But offense, you need the right guys that, again, it's not even just about the coordinators. It's also about the position coaches, having guys that can dig into your players in the rooms when you can't be there as a head coach. Like, you can't be in every room all the time. You can set the message for everyone to go and accomplish their missions, but it takes that's why everything there's a team. That's why there's a coaching staff, because you need all these different people, and that's where the Steelers, I think, have to be smart as far as people they bring into the organization for that.
Yeah, and you do wonder too, like a receivers coach might be another area where I kind of hone in on, just in the way that we saw some of the problems stem from that room in terms of the offense as a whole this season. But again, Pat Meyer too with offensive line. Like, I feel like for us being in the locker room, we saw some of those problem areas and where they stemmed from. And I think that could be, again, a bigger thing too. You talk about being an extension of the coaching staff. Like, you need to make sure the message from top to bottom is being heard in the room. And, you obviously have Mike Tomlin saying his things. You have the coaches, assistants saying things. You have the vets and the leaders saying things, that trickle down effect from top to bottom. But I do think that maybe that might be another area too, just because of the message and the way that we saw, again, some of the things we saw from George Pickens and Deontay Johnson this season. And partially is that just the receiver mentality. Part of it is maybe bigger things than that.
Absolutely. Those are things we'll get answers for soon, I believe, as the Steelers continue working out. Brisbane Jackson, the Steelers receivers coach right now. He's been so for 2 years. Let's get into some picks, though, Rick, real quick. Jenna, the Steelers aren't in the playoffs anymore, but we still want to get some thoughts here. As always, all our odds, lines, and ends are brought to you from FanDuel Sportsbook. Saturday, 4:31 p.m., the Texans at the Ravens. The Ravens are 9.5-point favorites with the over-under 43.5. I'm taking Baltimore, but man, CJ Stroud scares me, Jenna.
Me too. I'm taking the Ravens, but I would pick the Texans to cover, just because
Agreed.
The way they tore up that Browns defense, and I know you and I talked about the differences between the Browns at home versus the Browns on the road, but my goodness, and their defense also looked phenomenal. Now, again, I felt like there was going to be a little bit of Joe Flacco kind of coming down to earth, but that defense was phenomenal. What a great job by DeMeco Ryans and CJ Stroud and that entire team. I think the Ravens are just a better, more complete team. But again, this could be a back and forth, really, really, really fun matchup. I cannot wait to watch these two quarterbacks duel it out.
Absolutely. Packers at Niners, an old school rivalry in the NFC. The Niners are 9.5-point favorites against the first 17 to ever win a playoff game, the Packers, who really lit up the Cowboys last weekend. The Packers, they used to have the Niners be the thorn in their side when they had Aaron Rodgers. Is there a chance they could be the thorn in the Niners side this weekend, Jenna?
I don't think so. I think the Niners win this game, but I think the Packers cover because they're just kind of playing loose and playing dangerously. I loved the interview with Jordan Love immediately after they won that game against the Cowboys. And he was asked, you guys clearly just kind of came into this one and you're really loose. And he's like, yeah, we have that confidence, that belief in each other. And for them, I mean, this is kind of one of those, they've been playing in the playoff mentality so long because of what they've had to do. This is always that like rest versus rust argument that I love seeing in the playoffs. I think the Niners are a better team. Again, more complete. The Ravens and the Niners to me are the two most complete teams, but I would not be surprised if the Packers make some noise in this one. I just think I like the Niners overall a bit more.
I agree. I like the Niners in this one. I even think that they beat them by beyond the 9.5-point spread. I think that their defense and offense are just too potent for what the Packers do. I think the Packers deserve a lot of credit for how they fought and how Jordan Love has improved, but I think they have some things to shore up on defense that are going to make this game a little bit wider of a margin. Last NFC game, Sunday, 3:01 p.m., Buccaneers at Lions. Buccaneers put a whooping on the Eagles. Lions got by the Rams, their first home win. They're feeling it right now. The Lions are 6.5-point favorites. That feels like a wide margin for me between these two teams. I'm going to take the Lions, but man, the Buccaneers, they intrigue me with the way they've played down the stretch.
Yeah, especially that defense. That's been something you've been kind of, on that train for a while, and I respect the heck out of it because it has been the case for the Bucs defense. They've been playing super well. I just think the Lions are kind of riding this magic right now of, hey, this is the first time in 30 years we won a home playoff game. That home field advantage is a massive part of this one. So I think this is probably going to be the closest game of the weekend for me. One of them, I should say, because the next one might also be close. But I think that the Lions are just riding that like magic type thing. I like this matchup a lot, but I think that they have just a little bit more talent on their team. And I'm going to love to see what they're doing. They're like my dark horse to just, they're a fun team. I'm on the Lions bandwagon is basically what I'm saying here.
There you go, riding with the kneecap biters.
That's right.
As far as Dan Campbell in that group, I'm taking the Lions as well. Last game of the weekend, Chiefs at Bills, the one that everyone's really going to be tuned into. The Bills are 2.5-point favorites. Man, this is big. I'm going with Buffalo simply because the way they beat the Chiefs earlier this season, it went down to the wire. I think Buffalo's a little bit hotter on the season, and the being at home is a big factor. The Chiefs, the way that they beat the Dolphins, and they should have beaten the Dolphins. I picked them to beat the Dolphins, but the way they beat the Dolphins gave me a little bit of a glimpse to ask, like, could they have figured something out that helps them against the bigger teams? I'm taking the Bills, but I don't like it.
Yeah, I think I'd be a little more confident, too, if the Bills weren't dealing with all the injuries that they're dealing with. I'm going with Buffalo. I will say that just because, Josh Allen to me and the Bills offense is what's going to get it done. I feel like the Chiefs are going to have to rely on their defense a little bit more just based on what the lack of explosiveness we've seen from Patrick Mahomes and his offense. I know that's been such a big talking point all season, but I also think home field advantage in Buffalo for this game is going to be massive. This is going to kind of be like a getting all the demons out type of game for the Bills, for Bills Mafia, for all of those fans at that game. I'm sure there's still going to be snow at the stadium at this point, so expect like snowball touchdowns celebrations once again. But I cannot wait to watch this game and just see what the Bills bring. I also think, my goodness, the two tight ends and the way that they deploy both Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox, it's like, this is such a fun offense to watch. So I like the Bills in this one, but this is going to be arguably like the game of the weekend, in my opinion.
Absolutely. She's Jenna Harner. I'm Chris Carter. Thanks so much for tuning into the Locked On Steelers podcast. Jenna, let people know they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
You can find me on Twitter at Jenna Harner11, Instagram, Jenna_Harner, and locally in Pittsburgh, as well as online, WPXI channel 11. Obviously, our Steelers coverage is kind of winding down, but we got a whole lot of everything Pittsburgh coming your way. So tune in when you can.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jenna. Thanks you all for tuning into the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com. Find me here in the Locked On Steelers podcast every Monday through Friday on your favorite podcasting app or on YouTube. Back Monday with more on your Pittsburgh Steelers right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.